way government regains the trust of its citizens is by telling the truth. There is no other way, no shortcut.
And I call upon our government to open up, like the Belgians have, the French have, the Brazilians have, the Argentines, the Mexicans have all released their files. It's about time now that we do the same thing and become a part of this planetary community.
It is way past time for all of us to know what our own government knows, instead of being kept in the dark by a policy of denial.
The last time the Congress held a hearing addressing the extraterrestrial issue was 1968, 44 years of sightings ago. In those 4.5 decades, hundreds of thousands of new sightings have taken place. Government agency witnesses have come forward. Media coverage has expanded. Hundreds of documentaries have been produced, thousands of books have been written, and yet the United States Congress has remained silent. So for a period of 5 days, at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., 2 blocks from the White House and 12 blocks from the Congress of the United States, we're going to conduct a citizen hearing on disclosure of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. 40 to 50 witnesses of high rank and station from military, from agencies, and possibly from intelligence services, along with the top researchers in the world, will give 30 hours of testimony to 5 former members of the United States Congress.
So maybe the citizens' hearing has a chance to try to leverage open some of the truth about the fact that we're not alone in this universe, that we might actually begin to look at what we really are, what the true history of this planet is. And that might be what gets us into a future without self-destruction.
The motto of the citizen hearing is if Congress won't do its job, the people will.
It's our commitment to listen through objective ears and to ask the kinds of questions that we think that the American people would like us to ask.
We're trying to break this open. We're trying to end the truth embargo that we call it with a disclosure event, and that would be when the President of the United States comes before the American people and acknowledges the extraterrestrial presence.
We have a history that I'm aware of, particularly starting with the Roswell incident, but even long before that, that we have been visited by aliens, visitors.
You have to be very arrogant and presumptive to believe that this is the only place where life exists in a universe this large.
We are convinced that the intelligence interacting with this planet has been here for more than 270 million years, predating the dinosaurs.
Look, the evidence is overwhelming, and it has been since even the 1950s. The phenomena that is being seen all over the world by millions of people for 6.5 decades.
And one of the things that they were told is that mental phenomena was involved with the saucers. So there's a lot of technology here.
Sources I have who have been in what's called the vault at the National Security Agency and other facilities, we really figured out gravity control.
And that was what I got access to. And I saw the unquestioned photographs of UFOs, one of which had crashed in a particular site.
You were already saying that President Wilson would have never been interested in the phenomena that might evolve extraterrestrial.
Carter asked to be briefed by the Director of Central Intelligence on the issue of UFOs.
Yes, we're not alone. They are here. We can go there, and in due course we will.
I was challenged at that point to try to determine whether or not I would reveal these things.
But the ones that look like they're circular, so-called flying saucers, there have been prototypes of this for a number of years.
That we are dealing with a phenomenon that is non-human, and that our government's own documents describe it as extraterrestrial biological entities, and they use in their own documents the acronym EBA, extraterrestrial biological entities.
Whether they are extraterrestrial or not is really quite irrelevant to whether or not there ought to be hearings on this, because the First Amendment to the Constitution says the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
At that time, I was a first lieutenant, U.S. Air Force stationed at Malcolm Air Force Base, Montana. I was trained and assigned duties as a missile launch officer for the Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missile. I was designated Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander and part of a two-man crew. My commander at that time was Lieutenant Frederick Mywell. He's now deceased. We were on duty inside the Oscar Launch Control Center, a concrete capsule located about 60 feet underground. We had operational control over 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles. Each missile operates independently and has its own source of primary and backup power systems. It is important for you to note that the command and control for these missiles was entirely located within the capsule. There was absolutely no means to affect any of the missile systems from outside the capsule. On the evening of March 24, 1967, while my commander was on a scheduled rest break, I received the first of two phone calls from my topside flight security controller, FSC. The first call was to report unidentified lighted objects flying above the facility. Minutes later, the FSC phoned again and reported in a very agitated state that there was a large oval-shaped object hovering above the front gate. It was a red pulsating lighted object approximately 30 to 40 feet in diameter. The best he could describe it. It was difficult to distinguish a structural part of it on the inside, except that it was a glowing red pulsating object. He had all the men out there with their weapons drawn. He wanted me to know, wanted me to tell him what to do next. I, of course, told him something like, make sure nothing comes inside the perimeter fence. As I started to inform my commander, our missiles began to shut down. We lost alert status on all 10 missiles while this object was above our facility. When we queried the fault system, all missiles reported guidance and control system failure. At that time, the FSC reported to me that the object had flown off at high speed. When the security alert team arrived at the affected LFs, and I'll read LFs meaning launch facilities, they reported seeing the object hovering over those sites. As they approached closer to the object, they lost all communications with the FSC. After speaking to the wing command post, Lieutenant Mywell informed me that the same thing happened at another flight. At that time, I assumed that meant that night, but it turns out what he meant was it happened at another flight about a week earlier. He just reported, they reported that the objects were above them, and at that point the missiles started shutting down, disabled. Recently, let's say 2010, there was a shutdown of 50 missiles at Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. This was announced by the Air Force. It was announced that there was eventually announced that it was a computer glitch. Now, I'm very worried about that. I'm not sure I believe that, but we do have witnesses that have come forward, both civilian and Air Force, that said they saw an object in the sky at the time of the shutdowns. This is still being investigated, but these incidents are still going on. These objects know in great detail how our missiles operate.
They know ours, but we don't know theirs.
That's right, and they can shut down our missiles at any time. They have proven that. They know in great detail how they operate, and so if you release that information to the public, what do you say then about, what kind of defense do we have against these things?
The greatest thing that's happened is more people have come forward. You heard Bruce Fenstermacher and Mr. Schindel say that as a result of my appearing on public broadcasting programs, they decided to go ahead and come out. So, again, if there are others out there that want to come forward and feel they can, deal with this, because there is still a ridicule factor involved, it's going to help this, disclosure eventually.
And you had 30 years to
Do you believe that it's an extraterrestrial presence that is causing that?
Yes, definitely not of this earth because of the way it flew. I was an aircraft certification engineer for over 22 years. I worked for FAA. I was in Air Force. The way it flew and the way it was able to shut down the missiles in a very specific way by sending a very specific signal to each of the missiles.
And you've never seen anything like that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't even imagine that something like that we would have today if it was ours in some way. Otherwise, we wouldn't worry about other people having nuclear weapons. We could just shut them down anytime we wanted to.
Have you ever feared reprisal for coming out, sharing the story, almost gathering troops, and thinking that either the Air Force or any other body would try to further suppress your story?
It's been on my mind. I've got to admit, there's always the possibility that there could be reprisals against me officially, but I have persevered, I've fought through that, and continue to talk about it.
The document I'm going to talk quickly about is the top secret memo. It's a 1950 document from Canada, but I want to sort of go around the documents that talk about why this is so important. If you took a look at the top document called memorandum there, you will see, to give you some background, in Canada there was 4 different organizations that controlled UFO files. There was the Department of Transport, there was the National Research Council, there was the RCMP, and there was the Department of Defense. But the actual discussion behind the sighting files as to what does the President say, what does the head of the military think about this, what does the Prime Minister of Canada think about this, that is all the stuff behind. That is the stuff that you will not see. So in this memorandum, which is the document, you've got it up there, I'll read just the one paragraph. It says, and what has happened here is all the documents in Canada, the sighting file material, has been moved in the 1960s to the National Research Council because nobody wants the documents, nobody knows what to do with them. So the National Research Council gets stuck with these documents. And this is a memo from somebody in the Department of Defense talking about the fact that Project Magnet document is in these files that have come to you. And he gives the warnings. He says, at no time should this be made available to the public. If you read the very last line, talking about this stuff, the discussions behind the Project Magnet files, he says, a copy of the Project Magnet file is attached to this. The original is attached and should not be destroyed until such time as the UFO subject has cooled off. So the intention was that the Project Magnet, the material behind Project Magnet, the discussions as to what was going on, would be destroyed. At the top of page 2 it says, this is an official report that sat on the Prime Minister's desk in Canada for 3 months, according to the wife of the guy who wrote it. It appears then that we are faced with a substantial probability of the real existence of extraterrestrial vehicles, regardless of whether or not they fit into our scheme of things. That was the official conclusion by the Canadian government report in 1952, which went to the Prime Minister. It's a top secret document. The Canadian government does not deny this document. It agrees that this is a legitimate document. It was stamped top secret. It was written by Wilbert B. Smith. The background to it was the Canadians in 1950 had decided they were going to go to the Americans. They were going to find out what the Americans knew about the flying saucer program. They went down and through the military attaché at the Canadian Embassy, and through the Canadian Embassy they asked questions of the Americans. Is this for real? What's going on? And here's the conclusion that went back to the Canadian government. The subject is the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated higher than the hydrogen bomb. Flying saucers exist. Their modus operandi is unknown, but there's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush, who is the science advisor to Roosevelt, that he's in charge of the program. And the fourth thing was the entire matter is considered to be of tremendous significance. At the instructions of the ambassador in the embassy, apart from Wright and myself, nobody is to discuss the matter with anybody. So the Canadians have been told. And on the second page of that, which is embassy number 4, basically it says the ambassador and I would be particularly interested in any indication that you may have heard of the possibility of an official statement The Canadians in 1950 were sitting, they had heard that the Americans had a crash flying saucer, they had been told that this was for real, and they were sitting there waiting for the Americans to make a statement.
Talking about these documents and how skeptics are always going to believe that it's not a legitimate document, that it doesn't have the provenance that it may actually have. Where do we find the burden of proof that will say no one can argue with this anymore?
The documents that I'm talking about, the Canadian documents, are undisputed. They are from Canadian archives. The Canadians do not deny the documents are legitimate. The only thing is that some of the documents come from Wilbur Smith's personal files, and those you're going to have the same question as to whether they're at a university, they're donated by the Sun, but people will say, well, those really don't have the same level of importance as the Canadian government document. But the top secret document that I'm referring to was a top secret Canadian document, was stayed classified for almost 30 years. That is not disputed by the Canadian government. They admit that document is legitimate. It says that flying saucers are real and that the Americans know about it.
So what about, the references to Americans where they dispute that they took part in that correspondence?
Well, the guy that we tracked down, the guy that gave the material, was interviewed in 1983, and he confirms, yes, I did do the interview, yes, the story's true, and he put it in writing. That's what I put into evidence today, was that he confirmed the fact that, yes, the story that was told by Wilbur Smith in the top secret document is the story that he told the Canadians.
And why are we still on oil? I think we're on oil because, and coal and nuclear power, because there has been an active, longitudinal, long-term suppression of really advanced sciences and technologies. There are 5,135 patents that have been seized under the National Security Act. And I think that this has created both a geopolitical emergency and a geophysical emergency. Whether you believe in global warming or not, you cannot have 7 billion people burning oil and gas and coal indefinitely. Whereas there are advanced technologies dealing with the physics of zero-point energy, so that every home and car would have a generator pulling energy out of the fabric of space-time, and you would never have to burn another drop of oil.
Why are we not there? Why are we doing it?
Because there has been active suppression of this information, as Mr. Sheehan reported. There are people on my team who have been threatened. There is a man working on one of these devices for my group. We provided some grant funding, and about two or 3 years ago, a former CIA director, who I don't want to talk about, with a group of people went down there and threatened him and his wife if he didn't stop. So this is a man who's attached to IT&T and does contract work for the CIA. The part of the technology that deals with energy generation should come out and has also been suppressed for reasons mainly of macroeconomic stability, because, as you know, part of the national security discussion has always been these would be highly disruptive technologies, to which I say, well, good, you want to be disrupted now or later when we go through a terminus with the environment melting down around us. We have got to make these hard decisions. In the French government, we've had discussions about this. They know that some of these objects are of extraterrestrial origin. They know that some of them are man-made. And the Lockheed Skunk Works, and some of my witnesses and sources work in the famous Skunk Works. And I will tell you that Ben Rich, who headed up the Lockheed Skunk Works, said before he died, and we have a witness to this comment, that we, quote, already have the technologies to take ET home. In other words, we already have at the Skunk Works interstellar capable technologies.
Something is very wrong in the underbelly of this country that I think is related directly to a policy of denial from World War II about the fact that extraterrestrial biological entities, to use our government's own phrase in its own alleged documents, are interacting with this planet, have been for centuries, and that there is an intimate relationship between what we are and what they made. And that might explain why there's no wholesale evidence anywhere that the non-humans want to kill humans. They want, it appears, from my point of view as an investigative reporter talking with so many people, that there is an ongoing research program about what is happening on this planet and the surface life on Earth.
Inside this city, Over the town of Waldorf, Maryland, dozens of witnesses reported an incredible scene. Multiple jet fighters chasing multiple large, unknown objects that were of blue and orange coloration. All the witnesses, two of whom I interviewed personally and several of whom spoke to national media, described the amazing performance and capability of these objects. The Air Force itself admitted that it had scrambled F-16s to investigate unknowns, which it had also admitted it had tracked on at least one of these objects on radar. We also learned that the UFO simply disappeared from the radar. The Air Force conclusion was that it could have been, quote, any number of things.
This morning also to this meeting, and I'm speaking to Florida. Unfortunately, I had conflict, so be with you week, but for all my potential to talk to about this subject. I am a former astronaut, flew to the moon on Apollo 14, and so I have a little bit of off the Earth experience. But also, I grew up near Roswell, New Mexico, a ranch boy, and the so-called Roswell incident of 1947 occurred when I was a senior in high school and getting ready to go off to college in the East. We have a history that I'm aware of, particularly starting with the Roswell incident, but even long before that, that we have been visited by aliens or visitors from different star systems. We're not alone in the universe, and we're only now beginning to get enough evidence through our science and our understanding of the way the universe is put together to recognize we really aren't alone, and that we can, in due course, just like others have, it appears, they come here, we go there. And so I think we'll have a lot of testimony here today regarding that fact, and I urge you to listen to it, and let's open this up to the larger picture and acknowledge, yes, we're not alone, they are here, we can go there, and in due course we will.
My name is A.J. Gillard, journalist from Brazil. I'm the president of the Brazilian UFO Center, named Brazilian Flying Saucer Research Center. And I'm a member of the Brazilian Committee of UFO Researchers, which has done a campaign in Brazil since 2004 to have total declassification of UFO files.
So what are you here this week to bring to the table? What would you like to tell people that you think is being under-recognized?
Well, Brazil has been officially involved in the UFO phenomena for quite some time. We have several different committees for UFO researchers on official basis that happened in the years of 54, 69, and 77. And all of them were composed by several members of the Brazilian military, and I mean Air Force mainly, but also Navy and Army, and intelligence personnel. And during all this time, these committees for UFO research, officially, a lot of information were obtained. And this information came through in a format of reports of sightings, pursuits of UFOs, sometimes photos and even films made by military personnel in Brazil in several occasions. Now, I bring to this occasion here in Washington a series of evidences that Brazil has solid, concrete information about UFO existence and its materiality and its precedency or origin in external areas from our planet. Mainly, I have information about UFOs in the Amazon that were obtained officially by a team of 3 dozen men built together to investigate UFOs in a particular area of Brazil, in a particular area of the Amazon, in an island called Colares. And in that occasion, during 4 months, these 3 men were faced with a phenomena that they could not explain in format of vehicles that came from outside this planet. And how do we know that? It's the very own conclusion of the members of that committee, and especially its commander, Captain Uranger Holanda, who, among others, were face to face dozens of times with extraterrestrial vehicles that are not designed, built here, but they are designed and built by other societies, other civilizations, and foreign in other planets.
Landings in Brazil?
Yes, we have lots of landings in Brazil. We have lots of abductions in Brazil. We have all sorts of cases from A to Z in the UFO casuistics. You will find everything you can possibly imagine in Brazil. We have some hotspots, places where UFOs can be seen almost daily, at least regularly, weekly. And the main point of all this is that this is not only of knowledge of Brazilian UFO researchers, it is also of the knowledge of the military and the government who have been involved, all those in a secret manner, in investigating UFOs. But when we speak about secrecy in Brazil for our military, it's not that they made to keep it secret like a priority. It's not the big thing, because so many times the government has shared with the population information here and there about this. And of course, this information that we share are only the whatever's above the line of the water. Is the big part of the biggest part of this iceberg is underneath the water, and this is what we're looking for through the campaign UFOs Freedom of Information Now, that is started in 2004 and has had so far a great success. Just recently, 10 days ago, I was coordinating a meeting with the Brazilian Air Force, Army, and Navy at the Brazilian Ministry of Defense. That was the first time in history in Brazil and in anywhere else in the world that such a thing happened. I mean, UFO researchers, civilian UFO researchers, were invited by the Ministry of Defense of a country to sit down with them and to sit down with military. Participating in that meeting, we had over 10 military from the 3 armed forces in Brazil, and they were all willing to listen to what we had to say. And we described the UFO phenomena in such a way that coincided with what they know about it.
And so they acknowledged it back?
They did acknowledge that, and also, especially the Brazilian Air Force has guaranteed that in June, perhaps July, a new batch of UFO documents would be released to the public and will be given to the civilian UFO researchers to investigate.
On why is this panel, why are we all retired members of Congress? Well, you know what? We don't have a lot to lose. But it would be, this would be one of the issues that a sitting member would risk losing an election over. 60-second ad. And clearance, into to find out data that you have to have clearance for. And but then that was the third piece of this is to me, and I feel maybe I'm being too optimistic. I think this week, Steve Bassett, Joe, I think this week is going to change the feeling and respect that the common constituent, the regular member of our country, the population, the populace. I think if they pay any attention to this, they are going to have a different respect for it. Instead of whispering to me, people who knew, I get teased a lot because I'm one of the most left, progressive members that have left the House, but that was in the House. And so my constituents, they're really supportive of me, lucky me. But they would come in and they would whisper, you know, Congresswoman, I think there's something to this. And I would say, well, if it is or isn't, I'm going to go and find out why we can't find out. And they can count on, you know, that I would do that. But I'm not sure I would have done it if I was a sitting member. I have to be honest with you.
My name's Nick Pope, formerly of the British Ministry of Defence.
All right, so you, we've got a lot of your testimony talking about this incident. Can you sum it up just in one sentence about the incident in the forest and your role in that whole ordeal?
The Rendlesham Forest incident was a series of UFO sightings involving multiple military witnesses who were in the United States Air Force, involving physical traces, because this was not lights in the sky, but something that landed. Radiation levels were taken at the landing site, and the Ministry of Defence's defense intelligence staff assessed those radiation readings as being significantly higher than background. I worked for the British government's UFO investigative program from 1991 to 1994, and although that was many years after the incident took place, I launched a cold case review, a retrospective analysis of this.
How would you compare the United Kingdom's current level with this versus the United States as far as being able to move towards a disclosure state?
The United Kingdom's UFO project was actually terminated in 2009 as part of a wider series of defense cuts. Having said that, from the year 2008 to the present day, the UK Ministry of Defence has embarked on a program to declassify and release its entire archive of UFO files. I have been involved in that process, and to date, around 50,000 pages of documentation have been released.
What's the one most important thing that we could hope for from the British government and across Europe in regards to this matter?
In relation to the Rendlesham Forest incident, unfortunately, defense intelligence staff files covering the period of this incident have been inadvertently destroyed. So while we have an ongoing program to declassify and release the archive of UFO files, unfortunately some records probably classified relating to Rendlesham appear to have been lost.
And do you think that those files that were lost on purpose?
I can't say whether the loss of these files was deliberate or accidental.
We've seen a lot of really interesting cases, a lot of history, a lot of current events trying to explain some unexplainable things. What has really resonated with you in the last 2 days?
You know, I come to this as a neophyte. I'm not at all versed on the issue as most people in the room are, and certainly our excellent professional testimony, people who have brought information. So I'm here to learn. This is only the second day. When I was invited about a month ago, I did the research. I looked at the 1968 Congressional report from the Science Committee, as well as other things, and brought me to this place. These 2 days of actual information and how it plays in our country and the world is something that I'm most excited about learning. And I know by Friday I'll be extra better at it. But I think the Congress has a role to play. I think we ought to mobilize countries across the world who are more into this. And I think we ought to educate Americans as to what it is and what it might become.
Has anything really stuck in your head or frightened you at all?
I'm not frightened. No, I'm not frightened. I'm concerned. I'm concerned like some of these men who have given their lives in the military and have been witnesses of some of this that we're studying this week, and then they have health care problems and can't get them taken care of. I'm concerned about that. As an appropriator for over 12 years in the Congress, those who give their lives for our country ought to be able to get the service of our country when they need it.
And even with just the second day, has this made you think about trying to use your own past history of public service to try to get involved with this issue?
I'm going to be definitely more involved in it as we go forward. I don't know what role yet, but I'm looking forward to working with it continually.
1967, when a female horse named Lady was found dead on a ranch near Alamosa in southern Colorado. The horse's entire skull and long neck had been stripped of flesh, and every organ in the chest of that horse had been surgically excised according to a medical doctor. There was no blood anywhere, not in the animal, not around the animal, and nowhere nearby. And there were no tracks of the animal. It was powdery soil, and the animal is lying there stripped of flesh, but there were no tracks around the body, not even the horse's tracks. But 100 and some feet away, there were horse tracks in a circle, as if the horse had been caught in something in which the feet had gone around in a circle. And then 100 and some feet away, the body was found. At that same time, and Jennifer, image 00, on July 15th, 1984, the Sunday Times in Australia headline, quote, "Cover-up alleged over UFO-linked animal slaughter. Many reports of UFOs and strange lights in the sky," close quote. Farmers in the Adelaide Hills have discovered mutilated animal corpses and burn marks on the ground. In one incident, researchers say a farmer discovered 4 cows with holes drilled into their skulls and the brains removed. Adelaide UFO researcher Colin Norris said, quote, "I have been told the Army asked the farmer to remain quiet about the animals and that the Army would cover the whole thing up," close quote. Mr. Norris said pod marks in the ground and burnt treetops indicated a UFO craft had landed. They had a journal from 1911 that had been published about 104 sheep being found in an Australian billabong with an ear, eye, tongue, genitals, and rectum poured out. 104 all in one billabong with no blood and no tracks around those animals either. Consistent with a specimen collected via electrosurgical excision, it is not possible to tell whether this lesion was caused by a laser. It does appear consistent with a heat-induced injury, close quote. But Lynn Lauber called me at KMGH-TV in Denver after the broadcast of my TV documentary, A Strange Harvest, and he said that he had seen my documentary, and he was calling me because, and this is what he said to me, he knew that something from outer space was involved in the mutilations that the RCMP in Canada had investigated. When I asked him, "Why then have you told the media the perpetrators are satanic cults?" he said, "The reason was that he felt the truth was too difficult to report publicly. And to get those people, law enforcement or ranchers, to stand up in front of a camera and tell the world what they've seen with their own eyes is the biggest difficulty of my entire career, because we are on a planet where humans are more afraid of humans and their ridicule than they are of extraterrestrials." I am hoping that in this citizen hearing, I kind of exercise to what I hope will take place. All of this should be presented in a formal, executive, official, congressional hearing of why has the agencies of the United States government, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the NRO, they've all been studying this. They have more data than I do. Why shouldn't this country get back on the track of being of and by and for the people?
I'm a police detective in England, having served almost 24 years with the British Transport Police.
For the majority of that time, for 20 years, I was a detective. I was dealing at the sharp end of evidential matters. I've been involved in murder, manslaughter, rape, etc., etc. I come to this subject on an evidential basis, and I think that is very necessary in this field. I am here principally to speak on behalf of police officers worldwide who have witnessed UFOs. In January 2002, moving to my police background, I created the Police Reporting UFO Sightings Database. It's commonly referred to as the Proof Force Police Database. You have an information pack with that information. It's basically there for UK police officers to record on and off-duty police sightings. Believe me, over the 11 years of my research, nothing will surprise me what anybody says in this field about what they report. It is truly extraordinary. When I began my research 11 years ago into British police officers, there were approximately 6 cases involving 10 officers. 11 years later, I now have over 425 cases involving over 940 British police officers. This is a significant amount, in my opinion. These sightings have taken place the length and breadth of Britain and have been reported at all times of the day. Whilst I'm not a big lover of statistics because they can be manipulated, I would say that the key statistic for me is that over 70% of these cases are multiple witness officer cases. Therefore, it is significant corroboration to a sighting event that were involved in tracking at least one object over 6 counties of Britain on the night of March the 30th, 31st, 1993. This is referred to as the Costard incident. Many police officers have observed structured craft of huge size and proportions in close proximity to their ground positions. These craft range in shape and size and dimensions from many tens of feet to many hundreds of feet inside. In October 1984, near Ariath Northolt in Middlesex, a silent black triangular object was seen at low altitude by 2 uniformed police officers on mobile patrol, which they described as being the size of 3 football fields. When I sought to clarify this description of size, they said when they saw it, it was above 3 football fields. So I think that's a pretty good representation of size. This report was made by Police Constable Robin Perry of the Metropolitan Police. On another occasion, in October 1978, 3 uniformed police officers in a rural area of Buckinghamshire observed a huge object, which they described as a size of a football field, which suddenly and silently materialised in front of them in the blink of an eye and at relative close proximity to their position. However, there were also a number of smaller objects flying around the large main object, akin to a mothership kind of scenario. And the larger object then projected a beam down to the ground, which was the width of the football field, which then traversed the ground as if scanning the terrain for several minutes. They watched this event for approximately 5 minutes before suddenly it went off and dematerialised in the blink of an eye. Trumbull County, Ohio, observed multiple circular UFOs from different geographical positions. In one particular sighting, the engine of the police vehicle driven by Sergeant Toby Maliro suddenly put out. When he got out of the vehicle, he looked up and a UFO was directly above him, shining a beam down. As soon as the object moved away, his engine restarted and he attempted a short pursuit. On the 5th of January 2000 in Illinois, multiple police officers observed a large triangular craft that was witnessed from many geographical positions and was sometimes seen in close proximity to their ground locations. Broadly speaking, all the officers involved in both of these incidents described craft that moved in silence, which were able to make incredibly high-speed manoeuvres, unlike that of any known aircraft. Finally, in the skies above Belgium between 1989 and 1991, hundreds of police officers observed large triangular objects all over the country. Many of these sightings involved multiple police officer witnesses and were frequently seen at close proximity to their ground locations.
We've heard a lot of really interesting commentary
making this a really global issue today, not just a United States
Right.
issue. Do you think it changes the nature of the game, though, when we've heard for the first time the word attack in conjunction with some of the accounts out of Brazil specifically?
Well, I think it does. I mean, I think up to this point, and again, what the military knows may be totally different than what we have heard at this hearing, but that there are saucers flying there, and I think that most people probably believe that. Whether they're ETs, again, that's up in the air. But you have, I think when you hear the word attack, and most of these seem to have been friendly, and even in the case where a guy said, one of our witnesses said, you know, he went after the person and tried to shoot him, that they did not fire back in that case. And we've only heard that one instance where they were trying to attack. And again, I don't know how you interpret that. I don't know if that was real or not, but it sounds like it. And when you talk about attack, yes, people do get, I think, panic.
This has almost become a hearing on global governance in some ways, talking about the fact that it couldn't just be a unilateral solution from any one government to look at pressing these issues. What would you think of the idea of a body like the United Nations taking this on, or where some governments don't subscribe to international law but would be interplanetary?
I think it would be very interesting to have United Nations take this issue on. I don't know if they will do it or not, but I think it would be interesting because this is not, as we heard today, on a very international level. You know, they're not just flying around looking at the United States. We're a little dot on the map. They're looking at this entire area, and why wouldn't they want to do this together?
I'm Antonio Juneus, and I'm originally with, I work as a journalist in the UFO phenomenon for many, many years. Currently, I'm with Open Minds production. I'm a senior editor for the Open Minds magazine in the Phoenix area, and but I'm here in these hearings, citizen hearings, representing. Well, I'm covering various things. This session was about South America and specifically about Chile, because I'm a Chilean American and I am very familiar with the history of UFO investigations and official UFO investigations in Chile. But this afternoon I'll be talking about France and Russia, and the other day I spoke about the Rockefeller Initiative. So I've been involved in many aspects of the UFO investigation.
So what I think today especially we saw is that this is not a U.S. issue, this is a global issue.
Oh, absolutely. I think even the more ardent skeptic would have to agree, at least from a sociological point of view. And a skeptic is not going to believe that UFOs are real or whatever, but even sociologically, even the most bad skeptic would have to agree that yes, this phenomenon is reported worldwide. It's sociologically speaking, it's global. And the interesting thing is that the UFOs, they don't care about boundaries, so they'll just go between one place and another. Of course, you know, unfortunately on Earth we're still stuck with nationalism, and so each country has its own history and its own investigation and so on.
So one thing we heard in this last set of testimony was that this was the first time we've heard about hostility from
Yes.
extraterrestrials, and that in Brazil there was an attack, is the word.
Well, I would say practically all of the hostile cases are restricted to Brazil. I don't know why, but and not even all of Brazil. Brazil is a huge country, but certain areas of the Amazon seems to be the case where this particular wave took place in the 1970s. But there are some other cases too, and most of them are restricted to Brazil. I don't think we need to generalize, you know. I mean, just that they're hostile humans and they're peaceful humans. Aliens could be the same. I don't see why people have this tendency to believe that all aliens have to be wonderful or all aliens have to be horrible. This is sort of in the science fiction movies, you know, they're either one way or the other way. But if we look at ourselves, it's a mixed bag.
My name is Stanton T. Friedman. I'm a retired nuclear physicist. I've been working on my own since 1970. Spent 14 years working in industry, a wide variety of advanced, highly technical, eventually canceled programs, nuclear airplanes, fission rockets, fusion rockets, nuclear power plants for space. So I do my own thing. I'm independent, thank goodness.
Good. So we've heard you say a lot of interesting things on the panel. Why don't you sum up for me, what's the most important takeaway from your expertise in this area?
Well, I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. That's the first thing. If it hadn't been for me, you wouldn't have heard about Roswell. Secondly, I've worked on advanced propulsion systems, so I know that the notion that you can't get here from there is wrong, flat out wrong. One of my books is Science Was Wrong, 14 chapters about smart people saying stupid things. You can't do this, you can't do that. Great astronomer saying man would never fly 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight, that kind of thing. So, and also because I've given over 700 lectures in all 50 states, 10 provinces, and 18 other countries, I've heard all the questions before, if you will, and I've had to think about them so that I have an answer on the stage, not tomorrow I'll get back to you kind of thing. So I'm interested in today, this whole week, because I have no idea what's going to come out of this. I'm impressed by the congressmen. They seem to be taking their job, or ex-congressmen, they seem to be taking their job seriously. So it's an interesting and different event. I've spoken to a lot of conferences, and this one is different. Format's different, and the tone is different.
So what really happened out there at Roswell that we need to know?
Well, it was actually near Corona, and a flying saucer crashed, was retrieved by the government. I was the first to talk to Major Marcel. His son is here now, who handled wreckage from that crash. His son is a medical doctor and was a colonel in the military. Called back in to serve in Iraq at age 68, would you believe? 200 flying hours in helicopters. He's a flight surgeon as well. And it's clear that the materials were like nothing from this planet, and it's clear that there was a cover-up. I spent a lot of time on the incident. I have a book about it. That wasn't the only crash, you understand. There are at least 2 other well-documented crashes. So aliens are visiting, governments are lying. We've taken, it's time for a new view of ourselves and our place in the universe. It wasn't very long ago we thought we were it. Ain't no other planets out there. We're the smartest and we're on top of the heap.
Now we know that's not true.
And that certainly isn't true. And I give the SETI guys a hard time, S-E-T-I, silly effort to investigate as far as I'm concerned, because it assumes that aliens are stuck at our level of technology and are sending us signals for some unknown reason. Our first long-distance radio signal was 1901. You mean nobody out there has done any better than that? I don't use a slide rule anymore. I did when I was young. There are better tools around now. So I try to bring a modicum of good sense to the topic, having answered all these questions, having listened to all the objections. I've won debates on the subject with SETI guys, incidentally. So it's an interesting experience. Roswell was not the only one, but it was certainly the first one that got any attention.
My name is Linda Moulton Howe. I am reporter and editor of earthfiles.com, a science and environment and real X Files news website. I report monthly science, environment, medical news, and real X Files for Coast to Coast AM on Premier Radio Networks. I have been a professional investigative journalist and TV producer since I graduated from Stanford University in 1968 with a master's degree in communication. I have worked in television, in radio, the web, written books, and the focus of all of my work related to the Real X-Files area has been my exposure to animal mutilations as a global phenomena, and having law enforcement, sheriffs and deputies tell me back in 1979, off the record then, that the perpetrators were creatures from outer space. And as stunning as that was to me in 1979, I know that the investigative report that I did called A Strange Harvest about the global animal mutilation phenomena was known to so many people because after my broadcast, a special 90 minutes on the CBS station in Denver, Colorado, where I was director of special projects, I began receiving mail. There was no computer. There were no emails then. It was hard letters and hard phone calls. I began receiving so much mail from around the world that the TV station had to bring it to me in bags, and the telephone calls overwhelmed the switchboard. That is only an indication that in 1979, when I first did the investigation on animal mutilations, there was this entire global knowledge of people who were ranchers, law enforcement, police, and pilots who knew that what I reported in A Strange Harvest was the truth. They knew it in the areas that they lived. And I realized then that I had just scratched the surface of a huge iceberg, that the planet is aware, even if it's in local towns and local ranches and the pilots that fly airplanes, that we are dealing with a phenomena that is non-human, and that our government's own documents describe it as extraterrestrial biological entities, and they use in their own documents the acronym EBA, extraterrestrial biological entities. Those are facts.
So one thing I heard you testify to was that in some of the reports about things that were recovered in the crashes, they were finding non-biological entities. They were almost androids or robots.
In my work, I think one of the most interesting revelations that came to me was, for the first time actually, only about the early 1990s, I began to hear through leaks that in some of the early autopsies, they weren't even cutting into what we would consider to be tissue. It was some sort of a fabric that was either covering tissue, but it was a fabric, and it was very difficult for the scalpels to go through. That led eventually in the early 2000s of the 21st century that I finally was able to do an interview with someone with firsthand knowledge about one of the autopsies at Wright-Patterson, who said he was in the room when they started the cut into the non-human body, one that was retrieved from the Roswell area in 1947, and that the statement was made in the room. This is not tissue as we know it, and that firsthand testimony opened up what I have come now to understand, that a big part of this phenomena are what we would call drones today, either non-piloted craft that are under the control of a prime intelligence, or craft that are containing extraterrestrial biological entities that are not strictly biological, may be in the category of androids under the control of a prime intelligence. And the irony is that we humans have been waking up to other life in the universe through cloned biological entities made by something else.
My name is Dan Sheehan. I am Chief Counsel for the Romero Institute in Santa Cruz, California. I'm the former Chief Counsel for the United States Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C. in their National Office of Social Ministry. And that was the context in which I've had most of the contact with regard to the UFO issue.
You discussed about going to the basement of the Library of Congress and witnessing some striking evidence.
Yes.
was the basis of a lot of your expertise on this.
That's
Can you
right.
describe that, please?
This is back in January of 1977 that I was asked to assist and participate in a major evaluation that was being done by the Congressional Research Service, the Science and Technology Division, for President Carter to attempt to secure access to classified information within the military and Central Intelligence Agency and others about the issue of extraterrestrial intelligence and the UFO phenomenon. And in that context, we secured my right to have access to the classified portions of Project Blue Book, the long-time United States Air Force official investigation. That there had been a number of releases that had been made by the U.S. Air Force publicly, and that they were basically debunking the entire issue about UFOs. But there was in fact a secret portion of the Project Blue Book where they actually sequestered all of the information that actually showed genuine UFOs and discussed the problems that they were having with these. And that was what I got access to. And I saw the unquestioned photographs of UFOs, one of which had crashed at a particular site where there was snow on the ground, and that they had plowed a huge trough through the field and had impacted into a bank, a dirt embankment. And I was able to see symbols on the dome at the base of the dome of the UFO, and I actually got to trace those. So we have a record of those, and that was in January of 1977.
You said that among this, there were stories of former CIA Director Bush not wanting to brief President Carter about this as he was coming into office.
Well, this wasn't in the Project Blue Book files. I ascertained this during the course of working on that investigation. The reason why we had to undertake that was because George H.W. Bush, who was the CIA director at the time when President Carter was elected in November of 1976, when in December, shortly after the election but prior to his inauguration, President Carter-elect asked the head of the CIA to brief him on the issue of UFOs. H.W. Bush refused to do it and said that it was highly classified. The president didn't have any need to know that, and he refused to do that, and said that if in fact H.W. Bush asked to be left on as the CIA director, and if he was going to be left on as the CIA director, then he would make some of this information available to the president, but if the president wouldn't keep him on, he wasn't going to give it to him. And that's what instigated the investigation being undertaken by President Carter-elect to get this information so he would have it when he became president. Carter asked to be briefed by the Director of Central Intelligence on the issue of UFOs. And in that meeting, CIA Director Bush asked the President-elect if the President-elect would leave him in as the Central Intelligence Agency Director, and that he would promise that he would never run for political office in his life if Carter would agree to keep him in as the Director of the CIA. Bush wanted to, at that time, become more or less like J. Edgar Hoover had become at the FBI, that he would remain, that it would be above politics, that he would remain in that position. President Carter reiterated his request for the UFO information, saying that he had his own person in mind to be the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, which happened to be Teddy Sorensen at the time. And Bush at that time then refused to provide the information to him, saying that he did not have adequate clearances, he was not the president yet, and that he should ask his own Central Intelligence Agency director for that. But if he wanted to have the information ahead of time, that what he could do is he could contact the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives, and that they had an ongoing relationship with the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service that could go about getting things declassified to show him. That is what generated the request from the Congressional Research Service to me as the General Counsel for the Jesuit headquarters in the United States, asking if I could gain access to the Vatican Library to obtain the information that the Vatican has in its library, in its classified sections, to deliver to the President for his review. I did that. I contacted the Jesuit, who happens to be the head of the Vatican Library. requesting this information, and much to my surprise, I was denied information. I wrote a second letter to them saying, look, I guess you must not know who we are here. This is the Jesuit headquarters in the United States. We have 10 provinces here in the United States, more than any other country in the world. And we're requesting this information to share with the President. They still declined. So I had to report that to Marcia Smith, who was the head of the Science and Technology Division of the Library of Congress Congressional Research Service. And she asked if I would be willing to become counsel, special counsel, to this investigation that was being conducted by the Science and Technology Committee. I agreed to do this. And I told her that I would need to have access to certain kinds of information that I would like to have declassified or get to see it. And she said, what would you like to see? And I said, well, the first thing I'd like to see is the classified sections of Project Blue Book. Those sections that have been referred to by Mr. Dolan earlier and by Gordon as not really available. Much to our surprise, I was granted permission to see them. And they brought them to Washington, and they brought them over to the Jefferson Building, the extension to the Congressional Library, before it was even open. A brand new building that they built across the street. And so I was invited to come over there. I went over there. No one else was in the building. They had security people at the door. And I went over, and I was brought downstairs into a room where they had these shoe boxes with microfilm in them and documents, etc. And in my review of those documents, I came upon photographs of unquestioned UFOs. It wasn't any question about what they were. It wasn't a light in the sky. It wasn't a vague report about having seen something going very fast by. These were photographs, official United States Air Force photographs, some taken through gun sites, but another one of a crashed saucer on the ground. There was snow in the photographs. It showed the saucer had hit into a field and had plowed across the field and was stuck into a snowbank set up about a 45-degree angle. And they had told me that I wasn't allowed to take any notes when I went in there. The two security men at the door told me I was not allowed to take any notes. But I actually had a yellow pad under my arm when I went in, like this. And so when I went in and when I saw these photographs, what I did is I cranked down the focus on the machine so that I could get a close-up view of these symbols that were around the dome of the UFO. And what I did is I opened up the yellow pad and I put the yellow pad in there and I traced the actual symbols that were along the base of the saucer. And then I closed it up and I said, I think I'd probably better leave now because I have this. So what I did is I put all this stuff back into the boxes and I put the little yellow pad under my arm and I walked back out and the two security guys said, I'd like my briefcase back. They handed me my briefcase and I started to walk away. And one of them says, what's that under your arm? And I said, oh, this is a yellow pad. And he opened it up and he leafed through all the pages and there was nothing there. And so, because I put it on the inside of the cardboard. And so I took that back with me to Jesuit headquarters. And I brought it to Father Bill Davis, who was my superior at the Jesuit headquarters. And we then agreed to go. We gathered all 54 of the major religious denominations, their Washington, D.C. offices. And we brought them into a meeting, and we proposed to them from the Jesuit National Headquarters that we establish as a priority having the churches try to ascertain what information we could get. And that we could get the backing of the churches and then go to the Vatican Library and see if we could start to address this.
I'm Stephen Bassett, the Executive Director of the Paradigm Research Group, a political advocacy organization, and the Executive Producer of the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, which is taking place this week at the National Press Club. What we have done is brought in from 10 countries, 40 witnesses. Half are top researchers, half are military agency, political individuals who can speak directly to the events and evidence which, in our view, confirm the presence of extraterrestrials engaging the human race right now and going back to easily the late 1940s. In order to grab the attention of the world, of the political media, and of the United States Congress, we are having these witnesses testify for 5 days and 30 hours to 6 former members of the United States Congress, distinguished members who between them have 80 years of service to the country and their constituents. They include Congressman Roscoe Bartlett, Congresswoman Carolyn Kilpatrick, Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, Congresswoman Darlene Hooley, Congressman Merrill Cook, and Senator Mike Gravel. As a result, we expect that there's going to be a desire on the part of the media particularly to compare this evidence and testimony with the White House's statement of November of 2011, a formal written statement made by the Office of Science and Technology Policy, that there is no evidence whatsoever for any life outside the planet or any engagement of human beings by non-human life, or any evidence or credible information that the government is hiding anything. I think that there are not too many reporters in the Washington right now that actually believe all 3 of those statements are true, if any of them are true. So we have a huge disconnect between formal government policy of the executive branch of the most powerful government in the world and the reality around us. And so we're trying to break this open. We're trying to end the truth embargo, that we call it, with a disclosure event, and that would be when the President of the United States comes before the American people and acknowledges the extraterrestrial presence.
All right, so just cutting right to the brass tacks.
Go for it.
So today, we are saying with certainty there is extraterrestrial existence, and
look, the evidence is overwhelming, and it has been since even the 1950s. The phenomena that is being seen all over the world by millions of people for 6.5 decades is non-human intelligent beings, almost certainly from other star systems with biospheres like our own, engaging the human race. That's just the way it is. It's the reality. The Earth is flat, the Earth goes around the sun, and there's extraterrestrials engaging us. We need to get used to that. It's difficult, though, to engage this issue and to adjust to it when the government itself denies that it's happening. This is the problem. We need to solve this problem. And the way we do it is by putting sufficient pressure on the United States government so the President will finally announce the ET presence. This pressure is primarily going to come from the media, which I think once they realize that the biggest story in history is right before them, and they've been given this information for a long time, are going to understand it's time to go into gate mode, investigation mode, and really ask tough questions of the right people. If the media chooses to do that, the truth embargo, frankly, will not last the summer of 2013.
all right, and last question. Captain Edgar Mitchell was the 6th man on the moon, Apollo 14. He just came out and said, they've visited, they've engaged us, we are not alone. What kind of credo does that have a man who stepped foot on the moon? He left the planet.
The international spokesperson for the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure is Captain Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, MIT, astronautics, and of course the man who walked on the moon on the Apollo 14 mission. He has been saying since 1997 that the Roswell event was in fact an extraterrestrial crash. Non-humans, bodies were recovered. He's also confirmed that we're being engaged. He has talked to people in the Hill. He's talked to people around him. When a man like that comes forward and makes a statement like that, there ought to be 1,000 television trucks out in front of his house. Because of the truth embargo, by and large, his statements have not been properly engaged. So once again, we put them before the American people and the American media. Edgar continues to stand up for the truth, and hopefully other members of NASA, maybe, and others will come forward and stand with him.
I'd like to ask Grant Cameron maybe the first question, and if the others have a comment, be very happy to take those too. And okay, is it possible that the Truman administration was concerned at the time more about either the Soviet Union, which you did mention, I think, Mr. Dahl, or Nazi Germany as a source of some of the unidentified flying maneuvers they were watching and reporting on, and being very concerned about?
I think it's basically the minute they looked at the Roswell crash, if that was the first crash, they saw technology. It's classified. End of game. This is, you're not giving this to the Soviets, you're not giving it to the Chinese. This is our type of technology. On Thursday, I'll refer to a Canadian government document in 1950 where the Canadians went to the United States, talked to American officials, And one of the things that they were told is that mental phenomena was involved with the saucers. To me, it was simple that Truman and the people around Truman saw technology. We need this. This is unbelievable technology, and whoever gets this technology rules the world. We're not giving it away. It's classified.
In 1945, we tested a bomb, White Sands, and then we dropped 2 in August on Japan. And I believe that that action, which was a nuclear event, became a focus to this intelligence, and therefore that's how the government became so intensely aware.
Can I add? Sure. I've done, the presidents, I spent a lot of time trying to find stories of UFOs back in history through presidents. It starts in Roosevelt's day, it ties into the atomic bomb. If you go through presidential history, presidents are watched very closely, all their records are kept. I can find nothing before Roosevelt. So,
atomic bombs, powerful rockets used to kill, not to deliver the mail, as some people said they would, and powerful radar, the beginning of the electronics revolution. The only place in the world in July 1947 where you could check out all 3 of those was southeastern New Mexico, which is where Roswell is.
only 3 years after shutting down their program, the U.S. Air Force, at the direction of the Secretary of the Air Force, contacted 2 documentary film producers who signed an official film contract at the Pentagon to do a documentary on UFOs. They were provided with a number of films and pictures, including a film of extraterrestrials landing at Holloman Air Force Base, of which they used 8 seconds in the final production. They were given another film marked Top Secret that was never returned and is still in their possession. The documentary was funded with $250,000, and they were asked not to source the funder of the money in the credits. A CIA agent was present through the entire production, and as Linda Howe can testify, she saw a letter to one of the producers from President Richard Nixon thanking him for his cooperation on the project. Former Senator Barry Goldwater wrote extensively on UFOs, such as in 1975 when he wrote about his friend General Curtis LeMay, who refused him access in 1964 to the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where alien hardware and bodies were rumored to have been held. Goldwater wrote, "I made an effort to find out what was in that building at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I was understandably denied this request. It is still classified above top secret." As chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Goldwater continued to answer UFO letters, stating in one letter, "This thing has gotten so highly classified, it is impossible to get anything on it." In another letter, Goldwater wrote, "I have no idea who controls the flow of need to know because, frankly, I was told in such an emphatic way that it was none of my business that I've never tried to make it my business since." And finally, Goldwater wrote, "I have been interested in this subject for a long time, and I know that whatever the Air Force has on the subject is going to remain highly classified."
Yes, I'm Merrill Cook. I am a former member of the Congress from the state of Utah. I've been impressed with much of what I've been hearing and listening to over the last day and a half. I thought today was particularly compelling for anyone that's like me, and that's open-minded but skeptical. Because you see, one of the things that this panel could decide, and may decide, and I think we're leaning toward it already, is doing anything we can to open up files, to stop what Mr. Bassett has called the truth embargo. Now, I witnessed today some very compelling testimony from members of the United States Air Force, where State Department acknowledgments are already indicating a cover-up. Now, to me, that says open the files. I think this is maybe one of the most important things this panel might be able to help influence. And that's regardless of where this really leads in terms of questions of UFOs and ET.
In your time in the Congress, I'm sure you saw a number of bureaucratic red tape things getting delayed, but did you ever see any deliberate things being covered up for the sake of covering up?
Well, you know, I can't really say I did. That's why I'm very careful the way I look at this. The word cover-up is used often. I wanted to establish, in my mind at least, that something significant to two members of the United States Air Force was indeed a cover-up. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that everything that they say happened in Rendlesham Forest is a cover-up. What I am saying is some of the key evidence of what happened and the descriptions of radiation, of heart problems resulting therefrom, of a young Army, I don't know what his rank was, he wasn't quite a sergeant at the time. But I think that would add some real credibility to what the sergeant was saying here today about what he saw, what he witnessed, and apparently there were 40 other members of the Air Force that confirmed what he said, but it would be nice to see those records. You know, I don't see how anybody could question their testimony if those medical records, if we can help open those files to those medical records, would confirm as far as what happened in England in December 1980, which I agree is probably more significant than Roswell in terms of figuring out what UFO and ET is, to get that direction on the likelihood, the possibilities.
So in this short time, while it has raised more questions, would you say you've gotten some answers already as far as looking at these issues?
Well, I'm impressed with the honesty and integrity of the witnesses I've heard so far. I have to say that I think Paradigm Research and Stephen Bassett in particular have absolutely raised witnesses that went far beyond what I thought was actually out there in terms of these important things that they've said, or sightings and feelings, and they're very credible. They don't exaggerate. They're not saying things that are outlandish. Sometimes I have to say, I've been a talk radio host myself. You can get some outlandish stuff on talk radio, but I've seen none of that here. I've seen some very reasonable, sober discussion of what people have witnessed and what they've experienced and what they've researched. The Veterans Affairs Department, I don't think, has any legal standing to keep the files we were talking about today secret or classified. I would go to the Veterans Affairs Department, and if they didn't open those up pretty quickly, I'd be sitting there in the White House, knocking on that Oval Office and demanding that President Obama or President Clinton, when I was in Congress, open that file, send them a memo. I'm tired of dealing with the Veterans Administration if they're going to continue stonewalling and keeping classified medical records. We're not talking about national security here. We're not talking about protection of important national security secrets. We're talking about medical files of people that have had radiation sickness, had gums turning white, had heart disease. I was really surprised that President Obama has made a statement through his, now I understand it was a low-level staffer that wrote it and delivered it, but he made a statement. There's been no cover-up of anything related to the whole question of UFOs. So yeah, and Bill Clinton never made a statement like that. I do feel that I could have gone to President Clinton, even if I was from a different party, and he would have said, hey, I'll go down there with you, Congressman Cook. We'll open that file, because you know something, he did. He had that. But I'm not saying, I'm not going to judge Obama yet on that question, but Clinton would have opened the file. If they've had as much trouble, and they've had Senator McCain, Senator Kyle, these other folks, Senator Exxon, working on this, and they haven't done it, it's time to try the President of the United States.
Today, some pretty shocking stories about two gentlemen from the Air Force who've
compelling. These are individuals that are reasonable persons that have done their service and have been mistreated by the government, have been mistreated by the VA, been mistreated by the Congress, and all because of this approach by the U.S. government that we're going to deny anything about these unidentified objects.
Now, we've already in the current situation seen sort of a VA backlog as far as health care for some veterans.
Which is terrible. You know, in the thousands, and then when they have to wait a year to have their records processed and they have a physical ailment, this is unacceptable, and it's so typical of the military and of the political leadership. Oh, support our boys, and then when they come home, well, forget it. They're no longer in uniform, and that's an approach that's been universal throughout all of military history.
And so, what do we think we can do to aid folks like these gentlemen we saw testify, as well as others who have been on the front line encountering these?
Well, first off, you've got to appreciate that, and I asked them, this is the first time they've really gone public with this. Up to this point in time, it's been all within the bowels of the bureaucracy, and so that's not good enough. And so I was recommending that they be very aggressive. But the fact that the hearing is taking place and the media will be covering this will help bring attention to their individual cases and to the cases of many servicemen who are not properly tended to after they've come back.
Congressman Cook said that this story alone was compelling enough that he would write a letter to the President, to the Veterans Administration, trying to seek further action. Would that be something you would consider signing on to?
Well, I'm not a great believer in letter writing. You know, I'm more in-your-face kind of an activist. So that's good. He's committed, he's persuaded, but I think what's more important was the hearing that a lot of people got, and this is being video streamed worldwide, so I think that'll be very effective.
My name is Richard Dolan. I'm a researcher and historian on the topic of UFOs. I've been writing about this and looking into it for about 20 years now.
So we've heard from a lot of people, a lot of different things, starting with Ed Mitchell, Sixth Man on the Moon,
Yep.
And he says, unequivocally, we are not alone. What does that mean when you have someone who's walked on the moon saying that statement?
Well, Edgar Mitchell's statements are incredibly important, and it's good that media is now dealing with them, because what he has said, this is the sixth man to walk on the moon, is not simply that it's real and someone is here. What he has said in the past, on a number of occasions, is that he's had highest level conversations with leading members of the national security community who have told him explicitly that there are scientists who know the reality of the UFO phenomenon in the classified world and indeed have gotten possession of some kind of acquired technology. And Edgar Mitchell has said this. And I've wondered for years, where's the media coverage on this? So it's very good that he's getting his message out.
So what's the biggest takeaway we can take away from your expertise on this with all the different testimony going on today?
Well, one of the things that has struck me for years about UFOs is the discrepancy between the massive amount of documentary evidence that we have on the one hand and the near complete absence of official acknowledgement of the reality on the other. You know, we have, through the Freedom of Information Act, many thousands of pages of declassified documents relating to UFOs. I wouldn't say any one of them by itself is proof that UFOs are ET. I would say that the top ones cumulatively create an unanswerable argument that this is a phenomenon that the U.S. military and intelligence community is interested in, very much so. And we're obligated to ask, why are they interested and why would they be? And yet, publicly, their statements are all to the contrary. And this is a discrepancy that I think we need to understand and resolve.
And with more countries coming forward now and wanting to look into this, and representatives from several different countries here today, does that help to hopefully add to the idea that maybe we'll finally get some real disclosure?
Well, very good question. We're in a new world now. We're in 2013. This is not the 1990s or the 1970s. We're in a completely connected world where things are moving ahead very, very fast. And you have to wonder about the communication technologies we'll have just 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I think stopping the reality of this coming out is going to be very, very difficult to do. The rest of the world is moving ahead of the United States in many, many ways in releasing data, their data on the UFO phenomenon, and just more simply and openly acknowledging that, yes, there is something happening in our airspace that we cannot explain.